Well, hi, it's the old duffer. You can't see me, which is probably quite good for most of you. Now, we found we had a drip from the sump once we painted it and cleaned it up. And hopefully this is picking up on me, because I've got my Dalek cam on. So I had to cut the bottom of the sump out and make a new piece. Obviously we'll repaint it, and it will look fine. I've left it full of oil last night, and there was no leaks, hurrah. So I made a new gasket. We buy gasket material in big rolls, so I made one. But the interesting or irritating thing about this, getting the sump in, you have to lift the suspension up so the pickup will miss the sump as you try and wiggle it in. So this is going to get interesting. It came out, so let's hopefully I can put it back. And I wasn't quite sure whether to use grease to hold the gasket in place or do it dry. So let's get amongst it and see if we can get it in there. I will remove one gasket so I don't damage it, and I'll put that on afterwards with a bit of luck. Hope you can get it around the axle. Now this, when I got it in the right place, it fell out, much like that. So he says, stay there. I've left the screws the other side, haven't I? Stupid boy. Alright, this is what you could do with an assistant. Leggy redhead type assistant. That'd be quite nice. But I don't have one of them, it's just Muppetry here, me. So, and the insulation tape, you can see that was because I sliced my finger open. But, and it wouldn't stop bleeding, so that's going to go like that. You can erase him rod the outside as well. Yeah, so this is where, should I stick it with grease? I'm not. And of course, being it's been in a roll, though I've had it squished out for a bit. Don't go in the big end in the nana. Just, that is very handy with an extra person. Yeah, I'm going to stick that down with grease. I'll go and get my grease gun. Hopefully that will do it. It's the old-fashioned way of doing it. Before we had such wonderful things as Hylamar and other equivalents, you know, that kind of stuff. We used to stick grease on it, which would glue the gasket in place while you were getting everything in there. And the biggest trouble is with grease, you end up with it all over you. Well, I do anyway. So at the end of the grease gun off, I'm going to grit it in there now, don't we? And we'll give it a splodge. Somewhere. I mean, what was wrong? I think they're quarter Whitworth threads. Why didn't they put in quarter Whitworth bolts? I mean, beggars belief, doesn't it? Or did they just like making life hard for themselves back in 1954? That seemed to work okay. So the original sump had two ribs here, but coming there and there to stiffen it, which it's not. Because bearing this has been pushed up into the ore strainer. Anything lower than that, which was just staying in, you know, you got the majority of the oil out when you drained it, but it was you couldn't get the snot out. And I've just taken the gasket that's on the grease, I hate the stuff, on the oil filter, and it was so old it just crumbled. So it hasn't had an oil change in a very long time. Excuse me how I get up. It's called old and decrepit. My hip is fantastic. My left knee is not now. That has gone on strike. It doesn't want to work anymore. So, hurry up. Come here, you. Anyway. Being this takes 17 litres of oil, probably a little bit more with the filter to start with. Obviously doing an oil change is a little bit expensive this day and age, but it's still cheaper than a blown engine because you feel the full of snot. So I did look in my Whitworth box and I didn't have enough quarter width hex bolts, otherwise I would have replaced all of these with hex bolts. There you go. Do it all. Old fiddlesticks. What is it when they fall off? The bloody washer comes off and goes in a totally separate direction to the screw. You think, really? If I wanted that to happen, it wouldn't do it. Yes, I managed to straighten the strainer. You can take it apart, stick it apart and strain it all out and wash it out of the parts washer. So that's back to how it should be now. And there should be more depth between that and, I don't know what this camera's doing, but that and the strainer that sits there, and that is now the lowest point of the sump because the space is downwards. I did a little bit of adjustment with the big hammer. Right, where are we? A few here to do. I didn't bother videoing making the gasket because I mean it's not very difficult, and I'm sure you guys know how to make gaskets. But if you don't and you'd like me to film a video how to make gaskets all shapes and sizes, then do let me know. We got need a podger in there. Yeah, we need a podger in there. Right. Here's a little pod. Need a podger. Right. Either one of those will probably do. Use something with a pointy end so it go up in the hole. I said the actors done about it. Right, all done and dusted. Put the oil filter housing back in with new filter and filled it with oil, and with sumps full of oil. Once we get round to painting it all, it'll look absolutely fine. I'm not going to worry about it. But here is the old sump. What's left of it is you can see it's really pitted badly, and you can see there's a few holes in it. And as it went round a radius, there was a few more holes. So I joined the dots up and cut it off, and then made a new piece and dressed it round a lump of metal in the vise because that's all I had, and I would love to have videoed it, but on my own I just don't, you know, I get everything covered in gunge and ruin it. So I use chisels. These are cheap sort of B&Q jobs, I believe. They're great for getting the old gasket off because you don't then dig in and make a mess with that sharp edge. You can get it off beautifully and clean the surface up. That is what's left of the old sealing ring that was around for the oil filter. It just fell apart when I pulled it out. And here's the contents of one sump. This is what we couldn't get out because it was beaten in. Yuck. And that's what happens. Mixture of water and probably carbon deposits and all sorts if you don't change the oil regularly, and that builds up in the engine. And that was all because it couldn't come out because the sump had been pushed up, you know, like a well. We didn't want a well. There you go, shiny new exhaust. We are getting there, slow but sure. Now it now holds oil. We can fill it up with coolant and get it running. I'll make an engine loom. I'm going to do 3 looms: an engine loom, a chassis loom with all the wires, and one for the cab. They'll all meet at the back of the cab above the radiator, and all with modern plugs and stuff like that. So that'll make life a bit easier. But yeah, you've got all the fuel lines are now in, fuel pumps in, all the air tanks are on. It is almost ready to get going, hence I needed to do me oil leak. So we'll call that it for this one, and until next time, ta-da.